Welcome everybody to episode 39 of UnHacked. And yes, Mario, your hair is just fine, pristine actually.
It's perfect with the group, right? Minus Bryan.
Minus Bryan, we're gonna have to kick him out soon enough. But I'm feeling bad because mine's I gotta polish mine. I'm a little bit scruffy. Anyways, all right, guys, let's get started here. Quick introductions. I'm Justin Shelley, CEO of Phoenix IT Advisors. And I am here with my regular co-hosts, Bryan and Mario, and then our, show up whenever the hell he wants, Brinder. Guys, take a second, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and who you do it for. And let's go in this order. Bryan, Mario, Brinder. Bryan, take it away.
All right, everybody. My name is Bryan Lachapelle with B4 Networks. We help business owners in the Niagara region, Ontario, Canada, to solve all the frustrations and headaches that come with dealing with technology.
All right,
Mario Zaki, CEO of Mastech IT, located in North Jersey, servicing the entire tri-state areas for anybody that has computers.
Beautiful, beautiful. Brinder.
Yeah, Brinder Hans with Red Rhino Networks. We're based out of Vancouver, BC, and similar to these guys, we're a managed IT services provider, and we take care of IT so our clients can focus on their business.
All right, guys, we all met, we go back, every 3 months or so, 4 months, every 3 months. We all got together in this peer group of IT consultants, and we frequently sit around and we shoot the shit, and we're half the time we are, sipping a beer or something. But one of the things at this most recent convention that was talked about, and Mario, I'm actually going to punt this to you because you brought it up. Go ahead and take this. What was it that you guys were talking about?
So one of the questions that was asked to, about 300 IT companies in the room was, when a business owner, like a prospect, is looking for a new IT company, what is typically the most important things that they choose when selecting an IT company? And everybody in the room voted that they feel the response time of the IT company was the most important thing. The fees, like how much they charge, and the expertise in the industry. Those were the top three in that order that the majority of the room thought that when a prospect is choosing an IT company, this is the three things that they're looking for.
That's what they're asking us, right? They're coming to us saying, how fast are you responding? What do you charge? And how good are you?
And when they asked the same people, well, what do you think they should be asking? What are the top three things that you should be asking? And overwhelmingly, the most popular answer was the security. Number two was the response time. Number three, if they were like, how close they are to the building. But security for when asking the prospect, or what based on conversations we've had, it ranked number 5 in that list, where IT people felt like it should have been number 1.
Should be number 1, and they're coming in with maybe that's important. What else? And Mario, okay, so that's your memory of it. Bryan, Brinder, do you guys have any thoughts on what is it that our prospects are asking when they come to us, and what should they be asking?
Yeah, so I was in the room when, and I'm thinking about that question, and one half of me is thinking like a technology person and thinking about cybersecurity. That's the primary important item we think they should be focused on, because we understand the risk to their business. But I'm also of the belief that a client's always right. If they're focused on growing their business, they have other priorities, which is what we have to think of when we try to get in their minds, in their shoes. They do want to address the cost. They do want to address how fast it is, because those are important to their business. And this is the unfortunate part of cybersecurity in my world. Like, a business doesn't gain anything by investing in cybersecurity. They just prevent themselves from losing something at best. And that is important. But risk is a hard thing to quantify. If you're a very big multi-billion-dollar business, you have risk analysts to get you a number of what your risk is, and you can make good decisions about it. But your typical 100-person, 15-person, whatever company doesn't have expensive risk analysts working for you. It's not a line item that shows up on your P&L. And so those are some of the thoughts that were running through my mind as I'm listening to this conversation.
Okay. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
So when I was in the room, one of the things that first popped into my head was that a lot of IT providers don't really have the maturity level that they should. So I would be looking at the maturity level of the IT provider. And what I mean by that is it might be hard to quantify for most people, but do they have systems? Do they have processes? Look at how they do their marketing and how they do their sales process. Are they following something that's logically step by step, or are they just kind of winging it and going about it like as if it was the first time they've done it? I have coached a lot of other IT providers, and a lot of them don't have any systems, any processes. They don't really know how to organize their business on a day-to-day basis. So I would even say, hey, if I were evaluating an IT company, show me your playbook, show me what you have as far as processes and procedures. Do you have SOPs? Do you have any kind of standardized way to set up a computer and set up your if there is a cybersecurity incident, show me what you would do, right? And that would be what I would be looking for, because even though fast response is important to me as a business owner, improving and incrementally improving over time. And that only comes from somebody who is actively working towards building systems and processes in their business.
Yeah, but will the average prospect or average business owner know to ask those? I mean, yes, you could educate them when you're sitting in there and say, by the way, you should be looking at that. But the problem is, I think when they do look at it, I don't know they're going to know what it really should be. Like they don't know what they don't know. Obviously, comparing a company that has like 15, 20 technicians has been in business for 40 years, they're going to have process, and some structure versus like a company that's 3 years old that has 2 people and something like that. But, a lot of times those 2 people very rarely are in the same room or the same running
right.
for a type of company. So I agree with you 200%. But I don't know if the average prospect will know that.
And that, Mario, is exactly why they should be listening to UnHacked.
Yeah,
because we are here to teach them, to educate them, so they know. I mean, because honestly, they don't like. Listen, if I'm choosing a doctor, for example, I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm looking for. But I know I want the best. I know I don't. My girl just had to go into. She had a torn retina, and like a doctor's got to take a fucking laser and shoot it into her eyeball. I don't know how to pick that guy. I just hope he knows what he's doing. I picked this guy. Well, actually, it was a referral, but I know he's flying a Citation jet around. His office was busy; he was full, and I didn't see a lot of people complaining that they came out blind. But like it is kind of a scary thing as a prospect when they're picking an IT provider that is handling some of the most important assets that they can quantify. We can't, some of these, I don't remember which of you mentioned they can't quantify risk. Mm-hmm. But it is incumbent upon us to teach them and to educate them and help them make these decisions, right? That is one of the main things that we do here. Secondarily, maybe it's even on par. But I say this all the time. I am here to learn. Right. I'm here to educate. I want to teach my prospects, but I'm also here to learn. And if you guys remember back to episode 27, we had Joseph Brunsman on the show, and the title was something about making sure the insurance company pays out in the event of a breach. That's what's on my mind. And if somebody had asked, if I'd been there, I wasn't there this time when this poll or this question was asked. But I would have been talking about like our number one concern should be keeping the Russians out of our bank accounts, right? That's what we talk about. I've even got my little Boris Grushenko guy that I talk about. That's who we're fighting. Well, I think I was a little bit blinded by this. Nowhere on the list that you guys have brought up and nowhere on my mindset prior to episode 27 was I talking about the fact that our biggest fear should be that we don't get sued after a breach. Like it's bad enough. We get breached. They take all our money and whatever crumbs are left, the attorneys come up behind us and suck that up, right? It's just like it's crazy. I was at an event this morning and somebody asked me, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, people call me because stuff breaks and they want me to fix it." Right? response times, everything that we just talked about. And then I said, but behind the scenes, what I really do, what I'm passionate about, what I lose sleep over is making sure that nobody breaks into your bank account and steals your money. And that if that happens, God forbid, the attorneys don't come up and take everything else that's left. So, and this point was even made further when we all jump on this and we're getting ready to record. And Barinder, what did you say about these lawsuits that happen post breach?
So, yeah, like, I mean, are we talking about the Life Labs incident where?
No, when I said, hey, we're going to talk about these breaches and the follow-up lawsuits, and you're like, doesn't apply.
We're Canadian. Yeah, we're Canadian. We're not as litigious as the U.S. But I mean, it does happen here. It's not obviously not the same level as the U.S., but it is absolutely a concern, and it is rising. That's the other thing.
That's the point.
People need to recover costs, whether it's your insurance provider, the individuals that are affected and protected by the privacy legislation in Canada. There are lawsuits. They're rising. And there's actually new legislation on the books that the government is trying to work through. We're just further behind than the EU and the US,
right.
But we will get there. I mean,
and
our legislation on the books is old.
In our industry, we are not talking about this. And so, one of the things that I love the podcast, I love everything I learn, but week after week, I do kind of think we talk about the same stuff over and over a lot of times, because it's just a routine. It's our lives, right? But this is one example where we can actually get ahead of something that is a trend. It's getting worse and it's not being talked about. And that is why I wanted to kind of introduce this today. Not introduce, because we've talked about it. We have an episode where there was a $400 million lawsuit on the heels of a breach. It's not that we haven't talked about it, but the trend is it's getting worse. So let's go ahead, guys. Let's jump into this idea of, this rising risk. What do we do to get ahead of it? How do we prepare for it? How do we make sure it doesn't happen to us and to our clients? And Brenda, I'm going to punt it back to you because you were you went out, you found a case study in record time that does happen or did happen in Canada. And then Bryan, I think you had one too. So why don't you guys talk about that? And then Mario, you better be studying fast because I'm coming for you next. Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the one that affected me personally was Life Labs had a breach. Life Labs does your blood test, your analysis, and such. And this happened just before COVID, right? And they had this data breach where they lost our blood test records. They do all your diagnostics, and I got an email afterwards. Yes, you were on the list of people whose data was breached. But ultimately, Canada is unlike the U.S. Our fines are very small. And the fines that LifeLab, I believe, had to pay was something like $1.3 million. And that's a paltry sum of money. And ultimately, when COVID hit, they got all the contracts to do all the COVID testing, everything. So they made lots of money. But $1.3 million is nothing to these organizations. It is not a deterrent for them to invest in cybersecurity. So as business owners, because this one impacted me as an individual, and that organization is getting sued. But as business owners, we need to protect ourselves with cybersecurity insurance because we won't have the same resources those connections that those companies do if we get sued. And that's a small one. But in Desjardins' case, they had a $200 million class action lawsuit after an insider caused a massive loss of private data. And so, there are some big numbers as well.
Okay. Bryan, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's becoming more and more apparent that the legal side is pushing, like insurance and the legal side are pushing the agenda with regard to cybersecurity. Like meeting with a prospect and talking to them about cybersecurity, a lot of times they're not all that interested. I mean, they want to have security and they want to be secure, but it's not their primary objective, right? That's the primary objective of insurance and legal, and that's why the agenda is being pushed. Because if you want to have cyber insurance, they will say you have to have these things in place. To us saying, hey, we need ABC because my insurance company told me I had to, not because I want it, because I'm being told I have to. With that said, a lot more lawsuits are happening in Canada, and I know that it's common practice in the United States, but in Canada they're starting to become more and more prevalent. And the payouts, while Brinder, you laugh at 1.2 million is nothing to Life Labs, it's a huge amount to any small company. Like that's
Yes.
crippling to an organization. Like if I was sued and it cost me 1.2 million, that's more than our insurance by a couple $100,000, right? Because I think we have I think we have $2 million liability now for cyber insurance. But anyway, I digress. These amounts are they're still large for a business. If you don't have insurance, you're kind of screwed. And so having just the basic protections in place is important. And one of the key podcasts we had with one of the members, that I can't remember who it was, but is basically, if you are told by anybody that you have to have these 5 or 6 things in place and you dismiss the whole thing out of hand, that email is the cha-ching email to lawyers, right? They're looking at that going, you knew and you didn't do anything about it. But if you knew and even just started a journey and say, okay, let's do the first one and then we'll work on the second one and then we'll work on a third one, and as budgets allow, we'll keep working on different things to implement. Now they're looking at it going, well, they knew they had a problem, but they were working towards resolving the issues. And that will go a long way to reducing any kind of major payouts with any kind of legal. Yeah.
Joseph Brunsman. That's the episode that I mentioned before, and that is the one who kind of put it on my radar. Like I said, we've talked about it a little bit, but that was kind of a, it went from just it's out here somewhere to like big old fucking spotlight. Justin, you better pay attention to this right now, because man, I came away from that episode with a new outlook on this stuff. Mario, what are your thoughts on this?
I completely agree. It's just like Joseph Brunsman said in our episode 27. If you're showing that you're putting in the effort, you're doing the security, like, fortunately shit happens sometimes, but the problem is, and I don't know how it is with our future 51st state, right now, but in the United States, and it's been like this for a while. They have the mentality, you know what? I'm gonna sue this month, sons of bitches. Like, they have that mentality. They want to sue right away, and sometimes, obviously anybody can create a case. Could they win? Could they lose? If they show that they took all the proper precautions. This is the security we had in place. We did this. We did this. We did this, and shit happened. Then the case is not, there's no negligence in there, and that's the problem. Is a lot of these companies will have like negligence, or somebody like I believe, Justin, you mentioned, I think in one of the cities in, I think, Texas, there was somebody there saying, listen, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and they told them F off.
And ended up firing him.
There's a problem.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Shut up. And he didn't shut up. I'm like, all right, you're out. Fired him.
Yeah.
Not a great strategy, especially if the attorneys are sniffing around. And real quick, I want to talk about the money, because Bryan and Brenda, you guys are absolutely right. The good old United States of America is very sue happy, and we don't play around when we do this. We go for the throat. In fact, I had to do quite a bit of research to find numbers that were even like meaningful to our audience, because we're talking in hundreds of millions, the lawsuit settlements, the cost of the breach, and and this Equifax. So they're a huge company, and I get it, and these numbers don't really, but I want to make the case. After all was said and done, the court mandated security improvements in addition to everything else. Just the improvements they had to make after the fact was $1 billion with a B. So it's like, guys, you can do security on your own. You can put the plan of action in place. You can have your milestones. You can cover your ass, or you can have the court system do it for you. And you might not find that to your advantage. Thoughts?
Well, so many businesses shut down after a major data breach.
Right.
They just don't recover. Either they don't get the assets back because they lost their data, it was encrypted and it was broken. Or the hackers never released it. So and that's without even the lawsuit. And then the lawsuits become so crippling. I mean, so many business owners will just say, "Hey, I'm done. I don't want any part of this. Had a good run. We're out."
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
No,
problem is when the court mandates it, they're gonna mandate it like hard. Like a
yes.
lot, like $1 billion most likely. There's a lot of overkill there. I don't know any of the details, but I'm gonna assume there's a lot of overkill. So the problem is now, not only are they forcing you to put this stuff in there, but they're forcing you to put stuff in there that you may have never needed to put in there. And at a lower scale, the smaller businesses, that's still going to happen. If a CPA's office, gets breached and, say he's got 200 customers' data that was leaked, they're not going to mandate them to put $1 billion worth of security in there, but they're going to mandate them to do a lot, and a lot of the stuff that may not have been needed on top of the credit monitoring and all that stuff.
No, that's a good point. You may get the option to make decisions on your own if you do it in the right time frame. If you do it before you get hit, but once post breach, you really, those options are removed from you, assuming that you survive the attack, right? Assuming that the business even survives. Because all these costs, what we also don't talk about a lot is the reputational damage. We're going to have a guest on here I'm pretty excited for. He's an attorney, or he is a partner in a law firm that does high profile divorce cases. And I mean like professional athletes and Hollywood, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a competing firm in his area that was breached. So imagine going out and trying to convince, a movie star or the quarterback of your favorite football team, hey, let me handle your divorce case. Oh, I mean, don't worry about the fact that we got breached. We fixed it. The court made us do it, but we did do it, so we're good. Like this reputational damage is also something that you can't always overcome.
Yeah.
Especially in a situation like that where trust is what you're selling. A lot of people in professional services, trust is king.
And isn't that what we're all selling, though? I mean, really, what's that common phrase that people do business with? The ones that they know, like, and trust, right? I think I got that right. But trust is the key word. If you can't trust the person you're writing a check to, I mean, why are you going to keep writing that check?
Yeah, and one more thing too. It's not only but the trust with your clients or your vendors, people you're working with. A lot of times you'll just get a random email, from like a vendor or something, and they're like, oh, click on this SharePoint link that we sent you, and like we know that it's bad, it's a virus, they got hacked right away. We know, like, these guys are not legit, but what it could end up happening is you can not only infect yourselves, but you can infect your customers. So, how long does it take you to get back up and running? All right. And well, how long does it take your client to get back and running? A lot of times, and we see it a lot in the construction agency, the niche that we're in, like you could have like a 3-man electrical company that's working with like a huge contractor. And if they breach that contractor, well, guess what? Like that's going to be a huge problem. And you better believe that they're not going to work with you again. So these guys need to also vet who they're working with and stuff like that, because they don't want to be, infected and essentially within their, ecosystem.
Yeah. And we've seen that happen in Canada. So a lot of, obviously insurance is pushing down a lot of requirements to organizations to be acceptable to receive insurance from them. But then a lot of our clients are coming to and say, hey, we just received this big cybersecurity questionnaire from one of our primary vendors or customers, and we can't sell to them, and we want their business until we meet this criteria. We just need to answer this, and so there's a lot of top-down enforcement of a lot of cybersecurity improvements. Otherwise, you just won't get the business, which is healthy, I think, for the IT ecosystem.
I agree.
Yeah. But when it comes to insurance, a lot of these lawsuits, sure, the average individual or the people affected will sue you. But a lot of times, one insurance company sues the insurance company, and if there's any sort of negligence or a lack of responsibility by the end customer, they're all coming to you to ultimately say, "Hey, make us whole."
Coming to who?
Oh,
The
you
IT
as
company? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the customer, the end customer. Like if a customer gets sued, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the moral of the story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I was prepping for this, I'm going through the case by case, and there's a lot of them. Well, point A. What's hard preparing this, because our audience, we are not talking to the Equifax companies of the world. We're talking to our client base, which generally speaking is smaller organizations, a couple hundred employees and lower. These cases don't make the news. And so then two conclusions could be drawn. One, I'm too small to get hacked. That is a common misconception. And two, guys, if these great big organizations with seemingly endless resources are still getting hacked, what hope do I have? So why does it matter? Like we just get into this almost a hopeless, apathetic state. And so the point I wanted to make is that while it's not making the news, the damage is real. The numbers are proportionate. So while I'm talking about $1 billion enforcement for Equifax, my small company is not going to get hit with $1 billion, you've got to do this much cybersecurity infrastructure work. But it's going to be proportionate in both my number of employees, the records lost, the data stolen, and the size of my company. But it's still going to hurt. It's going to be a lot worse than if I had chosen to do this on my own, accord before things got ugly. But yeah, more and more, the other thing I saw as I was going through these cases is that, the attorneys and the courts are mandating not just to make the client whole financially and, with identity threat or identity theft protection, but they're also coming back to the company and forcing these technical improvements, these cybersecurity improvements. So, man, this is going back to episode 27 with Joseph Brunsman. The simplicity of the solution is really what struck me. Like, we're not talking about rocket science here. We're not talking about throwing all of our money at the problem. We're just talking about being proactive and having a plan in place and acting on the plan. You have to show that you're acting on it as well. But if that's in place, chances are you're not going to get breached in the first place. God forbid you do. Chances are you're not going to get hit with a lawsuit. And if we go to the absolute worst case scenario, you do get hit with a lawsuit, it's going to be significantly less than if you were not proactive and working on these things. So that was kind of my takeaway from the research and prepping for today's episode. So
because the courts frown on people who are neglectful, right? If
that's all it is. Yeah. Negligence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're taking some action and you have a plan and you're enacting that plan, it's a lot different than if you were completely ignoring the issue altogether.
Yeah.
And the courts recognize that.
I actually think that most of the sub 500 companies, the type of companies that we work with, I actually don't think cybersecurity, taking care of the fundamentals, is that expensive. I actually think it's quite affordable, reasonable, definitely way cheaper than going through a breach. If you take care of the fundamentals, you reduce your risk by, let's say, 90%. And that last 10% might cost you a lot if you really have important intellectual property, important confidential data that you need to preserve and protect. But getting to the 90% mark is actually very affordable and reasonable, and it's pretty straightforward to do as long as you have a good IT company or cybersecurity company working with you. And there's no reason any business shouldn't be doing it. And if an IT partner isn't capable of doing it, I mean, there's lots of those that exist. Find one, but I don't think cybersecurity is that expensive.
No, it really isn't. And but we're kind of back full circle. We're back to the beginning now. As somebody who is not trained and this is not the life they live, knowing, vetting that IT company does become challenging. I will grant them that. I posed this question, I think, I'm not going to say a name because I don't remember. We had a guest on here And the pushback was, I mean, you're CEO, you got to know something. You got to do your homework. You can't just, and that's the bottom line. Ignorance is not going to be an excuse. Not knowing is not going to help you. Not having a plan of action in place because you thought everything was okay is not going to help you. The courts, the attorneys, they're just going to say, well, you're living under a rock. I mean, are you really not aware of the fact that companies are getting breached day in and day out? We as CEOs, God, we have to know everything. We have to wear all the hats. And I don't want to be too rude, but if that's not the world you want to live in, then you probably better find a different gig.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is that it's also technically it's optional, and unlike car insurance, and at least in New Jersey, it's not optional. You want to drive, you have to have car insurance. As an employer, if you have employees, you have to have workman's comp insurance.
Right.
There's certain things that are meant, if you're financing a house, you need to have home insurance. It's not mandatory, it's optional. And unfortunately, when people feel like something is optional and they have that same mentality that you mentioned earlier, well, we're too small, and stuff like that, they're like, I don't need it, but it really should not be, especially like there's certain industries that it should be enforced, if not in all of them. Like if you're dealing with people's social security, if you're dealing with people's credit card and stuff like that, this stuff needs to be mandatory.
And everybody is,
Totally
by the
agree.
way, everybody's dealing with, we're gathering that information. If you're taking payments, unless you're taking cash, you're dealing with somewhere you're collecting that information. And while you're right, it's not mandatory in most cases. The gathering of financial data is regulated. You've got PCI compliance, if nothing else. If you're in healthcare, you're regulated. If you're in, and again, I'm speaking in the United States, I don't really know the laws in Canada. But some of this stuff is regulated. And then Mario, it's great to be in that situation where it's not mandatory until you get breached and then sued. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Now it is mandatory by court order. That's where we don't want to be. That's what we're trying to prevent. Right? Keep it optional, guys. Let's keep it optional.
Yeah. I get that it's hard for a business leader to assess the risk and make decisions when it comes to their IT and cybersecurity, what are best practices. But I'm pretty sure all of us on this conversation here today have downloadable IT buyer's guide, like a cheat sheet for any business leader to be able to make that assessment for themselves. Go download it from any one of our websites, or type in a sentence into any one of the AI apps, like what are my cybersecurity fundamentals I need to do based on a company this size. It'll spit it out to you in 2 minutes flat. And there's, I think nowadays with the tools we have, there's no excuse. We have to be proactive as business leaders. And it's not as hard as it used to be, thankfully, and not as expensive as how it used to be. The tools that you just have to have good IT companies that know how to use the tools. Buying the tools and letting it sit on a shelf also isn't a very good idea. You have to have competent people behind the scenes to be actually use it properly. A lot of the tools actually, like Microsoft 365, if you just enable the right settings, it doesn't even cost any money. Just do it.
Well, okay, Brenda, you're bringing up something that's been in my mind. You've got this mindset of maybe, correct me if I'm wrong. Have you guys gone to a prospect and said, hey, what are you doing for cybersecurity? Or are you sure you're secure? And you get this answer, my IT guy has it covered. Have you guys ever heard that?
Yeah.
All the time.
And I've got an antivirus.
Right. And that's fine if you know. How do you know? How do you know? Because you're writing a check? You think that's the right answer? You think you're going to go to court and you're like, hey, I've got an IT guy. I wrote a check, right? Great. And they may bring the IT company in. It doesn't matter. It's still your responsibility, Mr. CEO. But I'll tell you the simplest, and this, I'm going back to Joseph Brunsman. Love that guy. The answer is pretty easy. They've got you covered if you're meeting with them on a regular basis and you're reviewing what it is they're doing to protect you. And they're making recommendations and you have it on a plan. You've got it on a 3-year or 5-year roadmap. That's how you know your IT guy has you covered. That's how you know that when you're writing a check, you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah.
So, guys, final thoughts. We'll move to wrap this up because pretty soon we'll just start looping, which I love to do, but nobody loves to listen to it. So let's go ahead and do final thoughts, lessons learned. key points, and then we'll wrap for the week and go ahead and look forward to our next guest. Mario, why don't you take it first? Your key takeaway, Barinder, and then Bryan, you can bring us home.
I mean, key takeaway is, always, be on the lookout. Always see if you can, improve in something. Always get a second opinion. We always offer, a free security network assessment. We actually offer it all the time. And I was sitting with somebody a week ago, and they said those exact same words that you just said, Justin. My IT guy has it covered.
Yeah.
I just happened to look over, in the middle of, the room. I looked over and I saw a computer that was logged in, and their antivirus was Kaspersky.
Oh God!
And for anybody that doesn't know what Kaspersky is, it's a antivirus that is based in Russia.
It's the Russians. We always talk about the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. They're protecting the Russians with the Russians. Great.
And, I told him, like, well, does he know that the antivirus that, you're using, it's not even sold in the United States anymore? Go ahead and go to their website.
It's banned in the U.S. now.
Yeah.
You go right to their website. Right out there, it says this is not available for U.S. for U.S. residents or companies. I'm like, right, if that doesn't, and I told him, like, I'm not even going to continue with the meeting. If that doesn't show you right now that he doesn't have you covered, then I don't want to waste your time, and, it worked, so it's stuff like that. You always have to, even for us, we're always, checking out other things, making sure we're doing things the right way. There's no better way to do it. You always have to at least get a second opinion, whenever you can.
All right. Very good. Next up, Barinder.
Yeah. Yeah, so before I jump into a couple of final parting thoughts, I just want to share like the most preparation for this podcast, the most Canadian example of a cybersecurity breach I could find. So Tim Hortons, which is as Canadian as it gets, right? It's hockey and Tim Hortons. I guess they started tracking user location with the app without users' consent, and they ultimately settled by offering customers a free coffee and a donut.
I got mine.
Yes. Sign me up.
I know. I somehow missed the boat on that, but but that's how lax we are about these breaches in Canada, and I think that needs to change. As far as tips for business leaders to know if they're being served well and things to watch out for is. Does their IT professional know what sensitive data they have, and do they truly feel that's protected? In every discovery meeting, I always ask, what is the most sensitive data? What can you be sued for? Obviously, there's social security SIN numbers for every business because you have employees, but there's more. Credit card numbers, intellectual property, there could be a number of things. If somebody hasn't asked you those questions, start looking for some second opinions.
Yeah, good. Bryan?
Okay, taking it home. Lessons learned. Cybersecurity is not static. Cyber criminals don't look at you and go, you put a firewall in. I'm going to move on to somebody else. Dang it. Right? They are always innovating, and they are always looking for new ways to breach. And so we always have to be innovating. You, as a business owner, need to be innovating and need to be, or have somebody in place that will innovate on your behalf. Cybersecurity is not. Treat it like a journey. Treat it like you have a plan, and update that plan every quarter with what you're going to do next in order to improve your cybersecurity posture. Don't be static. Don't be that guy or girl or woman.
I mean, I say over and over, week after week, we sit here and we break it down. We talk about all the there's so many recommendations. It's I love that we can punch it into AI. We can get some simple answers. But really it's a complex problem. It's as a business owner, it's easy to get overwhelmed and to not really know what to do, how to take action. And we sit here and I semi-jokingly talk about the Russians are coming for us. The breaches that I've been involved with were mostly Russian-based, which is why I say that. But we've evolved to this point where the root problem now it has this tag on where watch out, the Russians are coming, but goddamn, it's all the attorneys. That was just something I didn't want to know, but I'm glad I do. and to kind of take this point home, because guys, we talked about it at the beginning. We live this world. We eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. And we've got that poll. What are clients asking or prospect asking us when they come to us? What should they be asking us? And so I love to be able to test my theories, because do my passions, does my attention, does it translate to what they want and what they need? So my final thought for the day is, I was sitting in front of a prospect just a few weeks ago, and I was explaining this problem. I'm like, breaches they're through the roof. And I've been saying that for years. I said, but now it's worse, because the attorneys are coming after the fact and they're suing us. And I could just see the anxiety and the stress building in this prospect that I was talking to. And I was like, but don't worry. Like, there's a very simple solution to this problem. We just have to have a plan of action, and we have to have milestones. Like, that's it.
Right.
We just have to know what we're doing, have a plan in place, and be taking these steps. And I just, in proving the point of the message, I just watched all the anxiety. You could just visibly see it drain off of her face. And the deal was done. The plan's being taken care of. And there's one more person being protected from both the Russians and the follow-up attorneys. So that was a great confirmation for me to know that the message is valid, it's working, and the solution itself is really what we all need to be paying attention to. So those are my final thoughts. Guys, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Mario, Bryan, as always, thank you for being here. Brender, love it when you make a guest appearance. You should do so more often. With that, guys, say goodbye, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
See you guys.
Have a great week.